gathered in the upper room, just waiting for the spark. A flame that shook the shadows, it lit up every heart. Each tongue began to sing aloud, no borders held them down. A story forged in courage from the cities to the towns. Rise up, feel the fire inside. Take the call, let the spirit guide. Every step, every word that we act, we're living out the book of Acts. The chains were breaking open, the blind began to see. Prison walls crumbled down, they walked out free. With love as their banner, they turned the world around. A revolution started with echoes of the sound. Rise up, feel the fire inside. Take the call, let the spirit guide. Every step, every word that we act, we're living out the book of Acts. They carried light through all the lands, through storms and trials with steady hands. From the streets to every soul, the mission clear, the gospel whole. Now here we stand in modern days, their mission still alive. The echoes of their bravery in every heart survive. So let's be bold and take our place. The time to act is near. The message moves eternally. It's loud and crystal clear. Rise up, feel the fire inside. Take the call, let the spirit guide. Every step, every word that we act, we're living out the book of Acts. Rise up, feel the fire inside. Take the call, let the spirit guide. Every step, every word that we act, we're living out the book of Acts. Rise up, stand tall, don't look away. Love's the anthem, they can't decay. Chains will break as truth shines through. Jesus gave his name to me, and yeah, you. Rise up, feel the fire inside. Take the call, let the spirit guide. Every step, every word that we act, we're living out the book of Acts.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to another edition of April in Acts. Maybe. There we go. Ugh, getting it all set up here. All right. Apparently, I'm still recovering from my travels, so I do apologize for that. But nonetheless, here we go. We are reading from Acts 17 today. At least we would be if I actually were putting that on the screen. How's that? There we go. All right, so we're reading from the Amplified version of the Bible. Paul at Thessalonica. Now, after Paul and Silas had traveled through Amphibia, why did I choose Acts? Why? After Paul and Silas had traveled through Amphipolis and Apollonia, there we go. They came to Thessalonica, where there was a synagogue of the Jews. And Paul entered the synagogue, as was his custom. So Paul had earlier announced that he was turning to the Gentiles, but he nevertheless kept to his practice of speaking to the Jews first, while focusing primarily on Gentiles. Okay. And the as was his custom I just realized is a Luke-ism. We see this pop out in the Gospel of Luke as well, I think. If I'm correct in this translation. I don't think I've actually read Luke in this translation, but in any case. For 3 Sabbaths, he engaged in discussion and friendly debate with them from the Scriptures, explaining and pointing out the scriptural evidence that it was necessary for the Christ to suffer and rise from the dead, and saying, "This Jesus, whom I am proclaiming to you, is Christ, the Messiah, the Anointed." And some of them were persuaded to believe and joined Paul and Silas along with a large number of the God-fearing Greeks and many of the leading women. I'll highlight a few things here. I'll be coming back to some of these, so it won't be maybe immediately apparent why I'm doing this, but nonetheless, I'm also going to eliminate a distraction that's going on my other screen here. Distraction's never good when you're trying to study the Bible. Number 5, verse 5. But the unbelieving Jews became jealous, and taking along some thugs from the lowlifes in the marketplace, they formed a mob and set the city in an uproar. And then, attacking Jason's house, tried to bring Paul and Silas out to the people. So we're not sure who Jason is, but apparently he is housing Paul and Silas. When they failed to find them, they dragged Jason and some of the brothers before the city of authorities, shouting, "These men who have turned the world upside down have come here too." Sorry, I like that. And Jason has welcomed them into his house and protected them. They are all saying things contrary to the decrees of Caesar, actually claiming that there's another king, Jesus. I think if I could do this on the fly, I absolutely would, of doing that in like a child voice that's whining to the teacher or to mom. Mom, these guys are doing things. Jason's doing. Jason, let him stay there. It's what it feels like to me. Oh my goodness. Verse 8. They stirred up the crowd and the city authorities who heard these things. And when they had taken security or bail from Jason and the others, they let them go. Well, the brothers immediately sent Paul and Silas away by night to Berea. And when they arrived, they entered the Jewish synagogue. Now, these people were noble and open minded, or more noble and open minded than those in Thessalonica. So they received the message of salvation through faith of the Christ, in the Christ, I should say, with great eagerness, examining the scriptures daily to see if these things were so. That's interesting. As a result, many of them became believers together with a number of prominent Greek women and men. But when the Jews of Thessalonica learned that the word of God concerning eternal salvation through faith in Christ had also been preached by Paul at Berea, they came there too, agitating and disturbing the crowds. Do we see these kind of things in our modern world? do we do we see these exact behaviors? Do we see people from literally being bussed in to attend protests, even in across state lines and things like that? Do we see that kind of thing today? Yeah. Verse 14. So at that time, the brothers immediately sent Paul away to go as far as the sea, but Silas and Timothy remained there at Berea. Those who escorted Paul brought him to Athens. And after receiving instructions from Paul for Silas and Timothy to join him as soon as possible, they left. So we see that we don't necessarily see that Timothy is ministering at this point, but he is among them, so we can assume that that is what's going on. Actually, I wonder how old Silas was. Yeah, anyway, that's a side wonder here. It could be. Uh, I'm actually curious about this. How old was Silas? And he was traveling with So the suggestion is that he would be an adult in his prime, but we don't have an exact age, is the quick answer. Verse 16. Now, while Paul was waiting for them at Athens, his spirit was greatly angered when he saw that the city was full of idols. So he had discussions in the synagogue with Jews and the God-fearing Gentiles, and in the marketplace day after day with those who happened to be there. And some of the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to engage in conversation with him. Epicurean is like eating, let's see, so these were among the leading philosophies of the day. Neither believed in a personal God. Indeed, the Epicureans were considered atheists. Their goal was to get as much out of life as possible. The Stoics had a strong fatalistic sense of duty, seeking to improve their inner man. And we still see Stoicism today, alive and well. It's not a bad thing in and of itself, but the note here would be that the best way to possibly improve the inner man is to have the inner man be born again by Jesus. Just saying. Let's see. And some said, what could this idle babbler with his eclectic scrap heap learning have in mind to say? Others said, he seems to be a proclaimer of strange deities because he was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. So, in other words, oh wow, this could be a show. They took him and brought him to the Areopagus, the hill of Ares, the Greek god of war. Mars Hill. There we go. So I was like, I thought that was Mars. Also known as Mars Hill, named for Mars, the Roman god of war. It was this place where the ancient Greek Areopagus Council convened and had varying powers in the course of its history. In Roman times, it was where the supreme government of Athens met. Okay. In Roman times. So they said, may we know what this strange new teaching is which you're proclaiming? For you are bringing some startling and strange things to our ears. So we want to know what they mean. Now, all the Athenians and the visitors visiting there used to spend their leisure time in nothing other than telling or hearing something new. So, in other words, this is well, two things to think about this. One is that this might be kind of like considered a entertainment. This isn't the first account of Athens being a center for seeking philosophies and things like that as entertainment. But what I want you to consider here too is that there is a certain currency in this as well, and I would argue that it's much like people treat the practice of influencing on social media. There are, well, and some people have been encouraging me to do certain things this way or that and the other, and to be cautious of this thing and that and the other, assuming that I had those notions of being part of that system. I don't. I don't necessarily think that that's really for me per se, to think of myself as an influencer or whatever, and make that my currency, if you will. There's other things too, though. I mean, I don't want to be just in frivolous conversations. So this would be an interesting setting for someone like Paul to be put into. But I think there's also an element of they probably assume that he's just not ready for this. Oh, but Paul is so ready for this. So, this one's one of my favorites. So, Paul, standing in the center of the Areopagus, said, men of Athens, I observe with every turn I make throughout the city that you are very religious and devout in all respects. Now, this would have been interesting for the Epicureans to hear, by the way, along with the Stoics, honestly. Now, as I was going along and carefully looking at your objects of worship, I came to an altar with this inscription, to an unknown God. So while the philosophers had literally no regard for the old mythological gods of the Greeks, the temples to various deities remained, and the worship practices continued, at least as a formal tradition. The altar to the unknown seems to have been constructed for the purpose of not acknowledging any god who had been overlooked, kind of like an insurance policy. Paul seized upon it as an opportunity to introduce the Greeks to Christ. So I've always found fascinating. Therefore, what you already worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you. The God who created the world and everything in it, since he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands, nor is he served by human hands. Wow. Footnotes as long as the scripture. Here we go. Here Paul uses an unusual word which normally refers to healing. He was educated in classical Greek literature to some extent, and what he says here recalls earlier arguments by Plato in his dialogues with the Euthyphio and Symposium, which should have struck a responsive chord in the listeners. It's very interesting. In the dialogues, Plato represents Socrates as analyzing the nature of service to a god. Points out that the god can only receive actual benefit from service if he is in need or lacking something. Paul masterfully adapts himself to the thinking of the Athenians, demonstrating to them that gods whom they serve with sacrifices and worship cannot really be gods at all, unless it is possible for a god to have faults or needs which have to be satisfied. This is also a good point for the Christian to bear in mind. Believers are to serve God, but this is not a service in any way that actually benefits him, because he is perfect and in no need of anything which man can supply. The same is true for the sacrificial system of the Old Testament. While God is represented there as demanding sacrifices, and sometimes enjoying their pleasant aromas, the sacrifices did not actually benefit him. In reality, they only pointed ahead to the supreme sacrifice of Christ, which is the ultimate payment for mankind's sins. In all my time reading the Amplified, I think this is literally the longest footnote that I have read so far. That is impressive. But it brings a lot to mind. I like this part right here. This is also good for the Christian to bear in mind. That's something that we twist up a little bit. We I'm gonna nail this down here. So basically, what I see in this, and I've been guilty of it myself, is serving because we want to feel needed. And what I mean by that, it's not just simple, um, you know, points or anything like that. Quite the contrary, actually. It is more of just there's a genuine need we have to feel like what we do matters in a way that's benefiting someone else. We need to feel that that is something that we can do that, but maybe nobody else can. We need to feel needed in that regards, that we are providing something unique and valuable. That's just it's and I'm not making a value judgment on that per se. I'm just saying when it comes to God, that's fine to start there, but we need to be honest with ourselves and analyze, okay, is that all this is? Am I doing this just because and let me back up a second. There's a way to have an indicator if this is true of you or not. Not every time, but a lot of times what I hear people say when they're in this mindset is I have to X. I have to go to church. I have to, you know, do this for the church. I need, I have to do so that have to thing, or sometimes need to, oh, I need to do this for the offering today. Oh, I have to go up and play in the band. These are things that I hear. And sometimes I think it is just a mode of speech that is acceptable for people to just kind of relate. But our words matter. And I think a lot of times it points to this notion of God needing us somehow. And therefore we have to do it. It's that burden that we carry. How wonderful it is. And you know what? Christ talks about this a little bit. That if that's the mindset, then you know what? Your reward will be here, not in heaven. And we need to recognize that if we're getting the pity points, if we're getting the attaboys, whatever that looks like here on earth, that's denying it there in heaven. It's only doing it here. So is that really what we want? That's again that left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing. So yeah. Anyway, Paul got to preaching. I got to preaching. You're sitting here going, Deej, get to the point. Come on. Yeah, cool footnote. Mhm. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. It scrolled up on me there. There we go. So, noisy hertz. I'm going to highlight that. Or actually, I don't know what else to do. Just to note that footnote. Okay, so nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, because it is he who gives all people life and breath and all things. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on the face of the earth, having determined their appointed times and the boundaries of their lands and territories. Controversial, but this has actually, um, I've seen studies that back this up. That there's no way evolution can explain how we all came to be the same way generally with the diversity that we have. But in things that are, from an evolutionary standpoint, standard, there's no way we could have been. There's no way we could have evolved to this. Is what I'm saying. And so, this is also something that would have been a little shocking for the people to hear as well, and the Greeks to hear, because they had a multiple origin. Okay, to be to be fair, I guess they had a um, whatever gods they worshipped were also responsible for creating certain people that then went on to either bear humans or not. Very complicated. You look at examples like, well, the story of Hercules comes up to my mind or whatever. But so you have these stories that Greeks would have told each other. Now, whether the Romans and the kind of the um, I don't know what to refer to this age, the Roman era Greeks would have believed this per se is hard to say, but basically he is drawing a line in the sand here about who God actually is, and there's only one God, and he's proving it here on Mars Hill. And he made one from one man every nation of mankind to live on the face of the earth, having determined their appointed times and the boundaries of their lands and territories. This was so that they would seek God. Perhaps they might grasp for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. This is actually kind of cool. For in him we live and move and exist. That is, in him we actually have our being. As even some of your own poets have said. Paul was probably exposed to Greek literature when he studied with Gamaliel. Yep. And quoting or paraphrasing from a line from one of their poets would have surprised and kept the attention of the audience. um, oh, is there a way to highlight that? I don't think I can. No. I wish I could add additional colors. That would be so cool. One of these days, we'll figure out a better way to be doing this. It's kind of that when you are doing this kind of thing every single day, it's hard to adapt. You kind of just get stuck. But anyway, there's a leadership trait there that I might want to come back to. But even as some of your own poets have said, for we also are his children. So then, being God's children, we should not think that the divine nature, deity, is like silver or gold or stone, sorry, an image formed by the art and imagination or skill of man. Therefore, God overlooked and disregarded the former ages of ignorance. But now, he commands all people everywhere to repent. That is, to change their old way of thinking, to regret their past sins, and to seek God's purpose for their lives. Because he has set a day when he will judge the inhabited world in a righteousness by a man whom he has appointed and destined for that task. And he has And he has provided credible proof to everyone by raising him from the dead. Now, when they heard the term resurrection from the dead, some mocked and sneered. Verse 18. So let's go back real quick. Verse 18 note is the philosophies of the day. Yes. Okay. Now, when they heard the term resurrection from the dead, some mocked and sneered, but others said, "We will hear from you again about this matter." So Paul left them, but some men joined him and believed. Among them were Dionysius, a judge of the council of Areopagus, and a woman named Damaris, and others with them. So there's a couple things here. One, can I just address this thing that's irritated me ever since I was in college? I mean, it's been almost 30 years, and I'm still hearing this kind of stuff. It's actually gotten worse. That Paul was a misogynist, and didn't respect women. Where? We can talk about verses in Timothy sometime about the context of that and why he said the things that he did to instruct a very specific scenario, some other specific scenarios. But as far as not respecting women and not feeling them as being worthy of being part of the ministry, yeah. Anyway, so let's drop the crap with that. All right. Sorry. It gets me upset when people try to distract from what is actually going on with the ministry. They kind of take license to the next step with that. And it actually, I have to say that I was fearing it, and it actually has happened. That the next step with that is to start rewriting. If you disagree to that level and think you've proven it, then you start rewriting. And that has been happening. But in any case, so he's invited back. Any public speaker, that's what they want to hear. Oh, when can you come back? That's the best sign that they've made a connection. is that notion of, hey, when can you come back? So anyway, let's go with some. The funny thing is, like, a lot of this is going to be not just leadership, but communication and connection. But there's a couple things here, just patterns that we see in powerful leaders in Scripture. Is one, it's not about them. We talked a little bit about that previously, but one of the things I want you to see here is that it's Paul's level of preparedness here. He has certain things that he just does, right? And so for Paul going to the synagogue, as was his custom, it was something where it's just like he had a certain way of doing things. And that, as much as it can drive me crazy sometimes, I have to admit, those kind of patterns have a strength in them. If you do something with repetition every day, it's hard not to have that integrated into your life. Now, hear me on this. We have these customs all the time. They're just not always positive. And so we don't think of them as customs. But we have these things all the time. I have watched it right now, unless you're literally watching this on said device. But if I say something like, "Oh, I checked my phone this morning and I saw this," half of you within 15 seconds will pick up your phone and check it. And I realized I just killed off any ability for you to be paying attention. So please hear me. Come back to me. Put the phone down. Put the phone down. It can wait. Give me 5 minutes of your time. It can wait. Okay? These customs that we have, these little patterns that we have, they're so ingrained that we often don't realize them. And so they can either be a strength or a weakness. And a good leadership trait is to fill your life with more of the positive traits and less of the negatives, right? So more of the positive customs, less of the negatives. And so by calling this out as being something that is positive here, he's showing his level of preparedness, which is way up here, instead of just, well, maybe I'll get there. You know what? If there's time, if my flight is on time, and maybe if I just, if I don't need to get a coffee or whatever, or maybe there's I don't know if there's something I need to be doing, or maybe there's something I need to meet with. I have this appointment later. Maybe I shouldn't. No, this was thing. He went to the synagogue. If there's a synagogue there, he went there. And we saw from an earlier passage, if there wasn't, he designated a place. He did what Jesus did, and he actually designated a place and a time for that prayer, for that fellowship, and others joined him in that. Sorry, others joined him in that. So for 3 Sabbaths, he had engaged in this, in discussion and friendly debate with them from the scriptures. This is actually kind of cool. Friendly debate. I love friendly debate. So for this to be happening um, in a place that also loves debate should have been fine. You shouldn't have had the people crying to teacher that things are somebody's misbehaving. You shouldn't have had the whininess in this, because this is discussion and friendly debate. But yeah. Um, and this is important too. I will say, when I was at the John Maxwell certification event in Orlando about a month ago, actually almost literally a month ago. Wow. Um, it was a blend of folks, and a lot of events that I go to that are like internet marketing events and things like that, oddly enough, tend to be more women than men in the crowd. But this particular one, I did notice that there was, I would say, half and half. So that was encouraging. But the bottom line is that um, there are, when it comes to leadership, we tend to see more men, but it's usually because of the sacrifices that have to be made to lead, and especially to go and lead. That it doesn't always work. In fact, Paul mentions this later on, that if this is something that's you feel called to, it's probably better not to be married. And that instruction would go to both men and women at that point. It's just like, if you have the concerns of the family, your family should be your priority. And so, that is well, maybe sometime we'll get into that with what that's meant in my life as well. But let's just say that there is a tenacity that would be missing there if there were other concerns. But with that, what I'm saying here is that there's no evidence that there's not a call to women to lead in the Bible as well. And so this is something I've had to change my heart on. I was actually one of those that, for the longest time, believed that women shouldn't be preaching or doing those kind of things in churches. I have been challenging that notion in my life, that it doesn't line up with Scripture. So I've actually been challenging that, and so I'm not done with it yet. I'll just say that. But as a blanket rule, I just don't see it. I see that there are women leaders in the early church, and so sorry, not sorry. It's just you can't just throw out all of that because of like 1 or 2 verses or whatever. It doesn't work that way. Um, that just like you can't say that it's bad to have long hair because of 1 verse, even though we have lots of indications that many people that were in the church and in the of the Jews and Gentiles would have had longer hair. So blanket rules don't work. Our hearts work. And then the whole turn the world upside down. There's a boldness that's required if you're called to lead, but specifically if you're called to be a communicator. If you are someone who is wanting to communicate, you have to go beyond just mere hearing. People have to do more than hear you. They have to connect with you on such a deep level that it's undeniable. And I wish I had the book right here with me. I don't. I think it's downstairs. I apologize. I was going to actually pull that book up and show you something, but um, another time perhaps. But there's that they're saying this in complaint, and I would take it as a compliment. um, it is cool that there were those that were um, more open minded at Berea that were examining the scriptures daily. So they were Jews, but taking on a Greek trait in that regards of examining the scriptures daily. In other words, it wasn't just, well, we'll do this on next Wednesday at 5. No, they were looking at this all the time and validating this and seeing Christ in the old, what we now call the Old Testament. But they would have called scriptures because the rest of it didn't exist yet. So as a result, many of them kept being believers. That's really cool. So, but then again, you have the haters going to hate, and they're going to bring the hate with them and do a hate tour. You're going to face it if you speak the truth. You will be assaulted because somebody else thinks that they have some sort of truth of their own because they have an opinion. So just speak truth. It's going to happen. So just if you try and hide from it, you're not going to be able to speak truth. Let's say it that way. If you try and hide and equivocate to have safety or have acceptance or to have these notions that people are not going to come after you. And I think this is again what Paul was saying about the uh, the the safety thing, as far as family goes and whatnot. It's like there's concerns that we have in those regards. So they can keep you from being fully as bold as you need to be. And am I going to sit here and lie to you and say that that's not a struggle for me? That is an hourly struggle for me. Hourly, as I'm making contacts and interacting with people, there is a constant concern of mine about, am I making it so that others won't be wanting to do business with me? This is a constant struggle of mine. And I can't not do this. And I'm confident it has already cost me some business. But what would it cost me to stay silent? It doesn't make sense in the long run. But in that short run, it's kind of scary. And I have to be honest about that. This is not something where I can just, brush under and say, no, it's actually fine. No, it's not actually fine. That's the real reality. Um, yeah. But there is a need to be bold about it. This whole Paul being angered about this, he doesn't go tossing things around at Athens. But he does have some discussions and um, first in the synagogue and then the marketplace, and he just starts talking about it. And so then he gets invited, and so that's kind of a cool thing. Um, so yeah, so being invited to talk. I I hesitate to say this, but your average street preacher, the person who's shouting at people, um, I don't see the value of that. You're not being invited to do that. You're not you're shouting at people rather than having conversations with them. Paul in the marketplace just had conversations. He was calm, collected. It's nothing like he was preaching in the square. He was having conversations with people and just listening to them, that sort of thing, not talking at them. It doesn't matter if you're in my mind, I see street preachers and people who are protesting at Tesla dealerships right now as exactly the same. They're making a bunch of noise and nobody's convinced by anything they're saying. Sorry, not sorry. This is an indication of a relationship that was being built because he was calm, collected, and listening, not just talking. He did some preaching, yes, but it's not a there's a difference between proclaiming and screaming at people. And so they they genuinely wanted to hear more because it was engaging to them. And it's almost impossible to engage someone without bringing them into the story. So that's exactly what Paul does, by the way. And that's the next thing I was going to say is that um, he observes and tells them something about them right from the start. In other words, you know, thanks for having me here today. Let me tell you a little bit more about myself. No, he was like, hey, thanks for having me here today. I love your city. And I see that there's a great monument over here, or whatever that is. Or, yeah, man, hey, Nashville, man, I love that chicken. Whatever. I'm just riffing here. But the reality is that we need to connect with people first and make it about them and bring them in. And so this is a great masterclass in communication as far as that goes. And so he doesn't just start out there and start screaming at them. He reasons with them. He actually brings them into the story. It's kind of cool. And we talked about the being served by human hands thing. It was really, really cool. But he's basically bringing their history along to the conclusion. It's saying that this was so that they would seek God. In other words, this unknown, insurance policy that you have over here, unknown God insurance policy, what that is valid. And let me tell you, let me bring that to full validity and explain this to you since you can't explain it for yourself. I can explain it for you. But it's they're bringing them along for that from that structure so that if they are making that association, now it is possible for them to see themselves seeking God as well. And so they're brought along with this and explained, even in their own uh, philosophies and poets. I actually wonder if your own poets have said this sort of thing. I wonder if that actually is just as much saying your philosophers have said, but it might just be me um, projecting that on there, I guess. But he's saying, God has overlooked that in the past. It's been okay for them because they didn't know, but now you know. So ignorance is no longer acceptable, and he calls them to action. So he's calling them and saying that God's commanding you. He's not saying Paul's, me, I need you to do this. He's saying God commands me, God commands you to repent. This is the result of all of this. And so that call to action, um, and that kind of like the proof of that is intriguing to them and causes them to be invited back. And that's where we're going to end today. I was going to mention, speaking of being bold, I keep forgetting to mention this part. In what is that? A week and a half? 2 weeks? What is the date? 2 weeks, approximately 2 weeks. We're going to have a launch event for a group that I'm part of in their speakers bureau. We have a local chapter here in the Nashville area that is launching, and so as part of that, we are doing an event. It'll be both in person and virtual, and so you will have the ability to. Let me. That didn't work. I was hoping to make this. Yeah, I don't. I actually don't know how to make this bigger or whatever, or aligned properly to still have the link in there. So what we'll do is we'll just probably hide that. But so basically, we have both the ability to join virtually and be there in person. And not only does this help support the launching of this ministry, but it's also a good way for you to be encouraged to be bolder for your faith and to not just hide behind worldly excuses when it comes to your what you believe is your calling. Now whether you know your calling or not, I guess I should say, it's what there is just simply truth, and if you are feeling yourself held back from that about proclaiming that, then I would encourage you to get to this event. It seems to be a theme for this one, not just from Riley, but from some other speakers that will be there as well. And so I do encourage you to be there in person if you're here in the area. If you are someone who is a business leader, either that means leading within your business, or you own the business, or you're just an executive, whatever that looks like. We have some members that are literally CEOs of mid-sized corporations. We have some that are just independent business owners. We have some that are directors of HR, for example, or whatever that looks like in your particular area. If you lead, we really want to serve you as members. So I would encourage you, if you're in the Nashville area, metro area, um, yeah, come meet us, and let's talk more about how we can serve you as we form this. So encourage you to do that. The event, is the link on there? Yeah, it'll be up on the C Suite for Christ. But also, here's the launch event itself, is that QR code. And then of course we are doing the um, April and Acts. There it is. Oh, I thought I had it. The April and Acts giveaway is this book here on hardcover. Literally, this book. I'm going to be sending this in the mail to someone. The drawing is on. I believe I had that scheduled for the 2nd. So on that broadcast, I'm not sure if it's lining up correctly, but I should double check this. I think that'll be our last broadcast for April and Acts, since we missed a couple days. I should verify that. We might be moving that drawing to Saturday, but I'll let you know. So that'll be a thing that we do, and yeah. So anyway, the more you enter, the more you win, or more entries you get, the more you win. So, or more, sorry, more you win. Oi, oi, oi! Scratch that from the record, please. That's not what this is. It is the more chances you have to win. I think maybe I need some more coffee, or need to just call this in. But basically, um, this is a great way to help spread the word about what we're doing here. I don't have an advertising budget, and this is not a for-profit venture for me right now. So I don't have a lot of subscribers or things like that, where YouTube's doing this or Facebook's doing this for me. Quite the opposite, actually. That they can be. Um, I'm just not interesting for them. I don't. Yeah, I'm not being pushed, which is no surprise. It's not really that kind of content. This is more for your daily devotions kind of thing. Is a very different thing. So, but I do want to know if people are going to be committed and involved to having these kind of things daily. So we have a small group of people right now, and I would love to see that grow if this is something that God has put on your heart. So feel free to do that. You'll have a chance to subscribe to the newsletter and to also be part of the YouTube experience as well. So I encourage you to, if nothing else, just to be signed up for that, which you do automatically when you enter. So kind of cool. All right, I'm gonna go. Just realized I have a meeting in about 8 minutes anyway, so I have to go here. I have to make this a shorter thing. Sometimes I just don't want to stop being with you. So, guys, you know what? I'm the Deej, and I love you. Be blessed by the best. Then go be a blessing all the rest. I'll see you guys tomorrow.